forum, so we will come to that very shortly. First of all, welcome to any people who are watching the live stream and members of the media. Councillors, do we have any apologies for this morning or for today? None. Okay, any declarations of interest? Councillor Blakely.
I just have no interest in public excluded item 8.2, and I plan to address that by leaving the room.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to public forum. So we have Kayleen Hunter. So if you'd like to take a seat, just when you're ready to go, push the button. You know which button to push. That's all good. Okay, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to address the council today. My name is Kayleen Huntress. I've been living in Waitaki for 2 years, and I moved here with my wife and 3 children. We're Americans, and we moved 11 times in 11 years in different countries around the world. And we decided to settle here in Waitaki because it's an amazing place. You have some of the cleanest air in the world blowing straight from Antarctica. You're surrounded by fertile farmland. You're full of creative and interesting people. But the water is what I want to talk with you about today. My family and I are permanent residents in New Zealand, and we recently applied for citizenship. And if all goes according to plan, then Mr. Mayor, you'll be presiding over our naturalization ceremony next year. And when we meet at that ceremony, you may notice that my teeth are discolored. Those of you who are sitting close enough, you may see these yellow stripes on my front teeth. This is from fluorosis, which is fluoride poisoning. Fluoride is a neurotoxin, and the damages that it can cause are more than just cosmetic. In my case, I developed epilepsy, which is a neurological disorder from which I will never recover. When I say fluoride is a neurotoxin, there is no debate on this issue. Every scientist agrees fluoride is a neurotoxin. Some scientists say that there's no evidence that in small amounts it causes harm to the human body. And I'd love to have a conversation with you about the science, but that's not what I'm here for today. Today, I want to share with you my lived experience. In the places where I've lived around the world, I have noticed that when I live in a place with fluoridated water, my seizures get worse. Fluoride actively causes harm in a segment of the population. And we don't know how much because the proper studies have not been done. Some people suffer more than others. According to a Harvard study in 2006, boys are 5 times more likely to develop bone cancer after drinking fluoridated water. We can't accurately dose fluoride in the population because some people drink more water than others. Some people are smaller and they proportionally ingest more. Adding fluoride to the water supply is adding a diluted poison to the water supply. And this affects different people differently. Now, listening to the two sides of this argument, fluoride is either a method of disposing of the toxic waste from the production of chemical fertilizer, or it is a medical treatment. If it is a medical treatment, I do not consent to this medical treatment. In 1990, the New Zealand Bill of Rights passed Section 11, where it says everyone has the right to refuse to undergo any medical treatment. I refuse to undergo this medical treatment. Does anyone else here refuse to undergo this medical treatment? I am not the only one. In 2007, Waitaki held a referendum on fluoridating the water supply, and 67% of Waitaki residents voted no, that they did not want the water supply fluoridated. And I know the ministry's directive makes things difficult for you, but this is exactly when we need your leadership. As citizens, we cannot push back against the Ministry of Health, but you, our elected representatives, we're counting on you to protect us. Now, if the purpose of fluoride is to improve the dental outcomes in children, we can apply it topically. We can use fluoridated toothpaste on toothbrushes in the classroom where kids can spit it out when they're done. The wrong method to deliver this medical treatment is to dose everyone in the population and have them ingest it so that fluoride will go into your internal organs. This neurotoxin will go into your brain. And there are many side effects. I'd like to request an injunction against the directive from the Ministry of Health. And I'd like you to hold an open public forum on this issue. Because I do not consent to this medical treatment. And many people here do not. Hamilton had a symposium in 2013 where they got all the scientists together. They invited industry scientists and community advocates to come together and look at the issue over 4 days. And at the end of it, they voted 7-1 against fluoridating the water. With the Ministry of Health directive and their threat of a $10,000 per day fine, I understand that causes complications for you as our local council. But you are not without options. This has a list of things that you can do. I'd like to ask you to take this and pass it on. Take one copy and pass it on if you don't mind. These are things that you can do in this issue. If it costs $10,000 a day to keep from fluoridating the water, maybe the 23,000 residents of Waitaki would be willing to pay less than 50 cents a day for clean water. We should ask them. I urge you as our local council to ask the citizens of Waitaki how they want to handle this issue instead of pretending that your hands are tied, because they're not. We're looking to you and your leadership to protect us and to protect New Zealand. Please don't let them poison our water. Thank you for your time.
Just point out that you're not permitted to record without permission. So if you just stop the recording, thank you very much. This is all being recorded, live streamed and so forth, so there's no need to zoom in on any particular person or whatever during proceedings. Essentially, yeah, thank you very much for that. As you are very aware, this is a directive from the Ministry of Health. You have every opportunity to protest that against the Ministry of Health, and I would encourage you to do that. As far as seeking an exemption, one of the councils did seek an exemption last year. Within 2 days, the Ministry of Health declined that application. Can you, sorry, please don't speak over me. You're in the council chamber now. We're working under particular rules, and there's a reason for that. So I'm trying to respond as best as I can. I'm not going to be answering all of the comments because I'm not an expert in it. I do not profess to know everything about fluoride, and none of us do. But what we are proposing is to have a webinar, a public forum that you're talking about.
If you'd like to educate yourself, there's plenty of information.
It's from Fluoride Free New Zealand. I don't trust them as a source of unbiased information.
Trust the industry scientists that are paid to dispose of waste through our body.
Can we stop having this as a debate? I want to set out, you've asked for a public forum. We will be having a public forum. It will be in the form of a webinar where people will be able to air their concerns and where questions can be asked, and where we will actually have some experts there to respond to those. So that is what we are looking to do. The council does not have a choice in this. Yes, we could say no and not do it and incur $10,000 a day fines, but I don't think that the majority of the community will want that. That is a problem. 2007, there was not a referendum held. There may have been a survey, and the respondents may have been 67% against. That is quite different to a referendum. So I'll just clarify that one for you. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen and boys and girls, there will be this opportunity to join onto that webinar and to contribute into that. We haven't determined, we haven't had a discussion as to when it will be and exactly how we will format it, but that is something we will work on, and we will be advising the community as soon as possible. So thank you very much for your presence here today, and we will proceed with our meeting now and move on to the first agenda item. So thank you. You're welcome to stay if you wish, or leave, whichever, up to you. Councillors, go to item 5.1. recommendations from the Performance Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on the 24th of October. And Mr. Hope, do you wish to speak to this one?
Mayor Kircher, yeah, this was just an item that officers thought was appropriate to bring to the attention of the committee, just the really highlighting the escalating cost they are facing with insurance. We have looked at options, made some minor changes, but yeah, it is a significant increase in cost that we're facing, but really is required to mitigate the risks over some key assets and other areas. So really happy to answer any questions, but haven't got too much else to add.
Thank you very much. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, Paul, I'm just trying to get a fix on the material provided with this report, which also went to the Audit and Risk Committee. I recall on that day when we discussed this, we actually identified a couple of savings, particularly. I think there was one that was acknowledged by the chair to be a relatively small $20,000 or $30,000 reduction. But the view was expressed that all savings were of value. And I'm just wondering, the report that's come to us hasn't identified those identified areas of savings. The table on page 5 shows that basically we're up for $230,653 more dollars worth of insurance cover this year, unless we trim it back. Why have those potential reductions not been included in the report to council?
Mr. Hope?
Yeah, there were a number of items that we were going to go away and talk to our brokers about, and we're still working through that process. So this is, this is just a highlight for the scale of the increase, rather than really sign off every individual policy. So it's it's just a reflection of what was reported to the committee, and we continue to work on making savings where we can.
But supplementary then, are we then able today, with regard to attachment 2, to say that we will insure for indemnity only the residential properties at Elm Street, Elmera Gardens and Test Street and the airport hangar, that we will remove from the insurance various Elmera Gardens assets, specifically the Avery structures, Croquet Garage, Croquet Pavilion, Croquet Shelter and Fernery, and yeah, can we do that today?
If council is comfortable with all those changes, yes, we can do that today.
Have to move.
Okay. Can you tell us how much that would save?
No, I can't, because that's what we're going through with the brokers. But yeah, none of those changes are going to be particularly material.
Sure. Deputy Mayor Halili.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm just reflecting back on the recommendation. Right back at the start, I think the main thing is just for us to acknowledge that there has been a significant increase in the insurance premiums. There is really good information that our team have provided in the background. With the increasing number of adverse weather events globally, the insurance market is increasingly challenged and premiums are rising. So I think just in terms of an overall risk assessment and to help protect all the assets and things that we have, the principle of the recommendation is to confirm the renewal with the premium changes as presented, also acknowledging Councillor Hopkins' specific, like kind of premiums and wanting to highlight those areas, but also mindful that our team are still making inquiries and anything less will be reflected within that. So I'm quite comfortable with how the recommendation sits. It's broad enough to be able to do what the team need to do, but also they can advise us in due course if there are any reductions. So there's no indication of any additional increases are there, Mr. Hope, as outlined. It's only reductions if there are.
I mean, these are basically, we've confirmed the costs for the coming year based on the cover that we've previously had. So I mean, it's, yeah, the idea was that, we would have to take on significant extra risk if we want to make a significant reduction in premium.
Thank you. And I think, that was reflected in the Performance Audit and Risk Committee where this was first discussed, and it very much is a case of, how much risk are we willing to take on behalf of our ratepayers? As much as we want to save them money, equally, we don't want to make it increase the risk to an extent that actually costs them a lot more if something happens, which seems to increasingly be the case around the world. So do we have any other questions? Okay, someone happy to move? Deputy Mayor Halaleli and Councillor Cowles second that. Any further discussion? Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, my concern is that I take Councillor or Deputy Mayor Hanaleli's point. You could say that the resolution that Council confirms insurance renewal with premium changes as presented is essentially just saying, oh, these are the facts we've got, but implicit in that, it seems to me to be an acceptance of a series of increases, which if you look at page 12 of the agenda, as I say, is going to add $230,000 to our insurance cover. $112,000 to material damage and business interruption increase, and $50,000 to the LAPP. Now, if we're doing a long-term plan that's going to have a lot of other additional costs, we shouldn't just be voting on this and saying, oh, well, we'll confirm these changes, full stop. We should be perhaps having a supplementary resolution saying that we will review total insurance premiums with a view to reducing the cost to the extent we consider appropriate. I just think we're being a little bit too passive in this regard, just if simply accepting the recommendation, because I think at the end of the Park Committee, officers were going to come back with proposed savings and cuts, and that hasn't happened, not here, and presumably won't happen at Park, and I think needs to.
And I think that was explained, that the discussions are still being held with the insurance company and or the broker, and so that needs to happen. Hopefully they will find those savings, but it is not a one-sided discussion, as has been mentioned. What's an acceptable cost, but you also have to weigh out what's the acceptable risk, and I don't think that we're just meekly going along with this and quite happy to pay the increase. But we are all facing significant increases in our own insurances at home for our vehicles. Everyone knows what the pressure is on as these different events have impacted the country, and insurance companies have to get that back, but also manage the risk and the cost of future events. So it is an unfortunate situation, but unless we have that full discussion around the risk side of the factor and not just the premium, we won't be getting anywhere. We need to factor in all of those things. That's the duty that we have to our ratepayers. So I'll certainly be supporting this, and if savings can be found through that further discussion, then we'll happily accept those. Does anyone else wish to speak on the matter? Okay, I'm going to put it, those in favour of the recommendation of the motion, sorry, please say aye. Aye. And against? No. That's carried. Thank you. Moving now to approval of the Dog Control Act annual report for the past year, and welcome Mr. Barnsley and Mr. Hope to the chamber, and while you get set up, once you're ready, just feel free to proceed.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks very much for having a look at this annual report. I'll just introduce Caitlin Fleming, if I may, our lead animal management officer, who's behind me here today. And Caitlin will hopefully give me a hand if there's any questions that you might have that I can't answer. So, yep, just over 5,500 dogs registered this year. The largest categories are in the working dog categories. Obviously, our landowners, farmers have multiple dogs. In fact, we have one owner who has, I think, 60 to 70 dogs, which some of you may have heard of or be familiar with. All of them registered, so we're quite happy with that situation. And in a place where at the moment they're not causing any nuisance, so that's good. Selected owners are our next largest category, which is really positive. You know, these are people who've demonstrated that they are responsible. They've met certain criteria, assessment criteria, and it's good to see that number of selected owners in the district. Unfortunately, the flip side is that we do have quite a large number of owners who aren't responsible. And this has resulted in an increase of complaints that we receive. It's increased quite significantly. This year we handled 633 complaints. So if you sort of put that into perspective, that's a huge number of interactions with different people, different dogs, a massive number of compliance conversations that we've had in the community. We tend to focus our greatest efforts at the dogs that present the greatest risk to the community. These tend to be the dogs that are aggressive towards people or animals. And so as part of that, we've been following up with owners of dangerous and menacing dogs to ensure that they're complying with the requirements of their classifications. So if a dog's classified as dangerous or menacing, they must meet certain criteria. They have to do certain things to manage that risk. So as well as following up with those dogs, we've also identified an increased number of dogs that we feel met the criteria for being a risk and were therefore classified as either dangerous or menacing. And you'll see that that's increased this year. Unfortunately, that does tend to take away a little bit from more proactive type work. We take opportunities to educate people as often as we can through every interaction. But the reality is that this is a very busy working environment, dealing with lots of issues on a daily basis. And I should say as well that the number of registered dogs doesn't reflect obviously how many dogs we've got in the district. Regularly finding dogs that are not registered. Just going back to the classified dogs, one thing that we are considering in the future is possibly a desexing initiative. The benefits of desexing are that dogs' behaviours can be sort of modified to an extent. They become sort of less aggressive, less prone to wandering, and we think that this might be a good opportunity to have an initiative that promotes desexing and perhaps subsidises it. So something that we're considering, we'd like to look at with you in the future is an option perhaps for registered dog owners for a small donation or part of their registration fee to go towards a desexing subsidy for people who identify where there's a need or if there's hardship or if there's a dog that's particularly problematic that we think that might benefit them. With the GIS department, we've created a more user-friendly map for the public to see and be aware of where they can walk and exercise their dogs and where they can't go. That's going to be also used for our pre-engagement for the district for the bylaws review. We're going to start pre-engagement in November. The number of dogs signed over to council's increased. We've impounded far more dogs than I think this is the most dogs we've impounded that I'm aware of. It's increased significantly. We have found a real problem with people just not taking responsibility, dogs wandering, people handing over dogs that they can no longer manage or look after. And consequently, that means that we have an increased busy pound, a very busy pound. Takes a lot of effort to run the pound, takes significant resources to make sure that dogs can be managed there appropriately, because some of these dogs are aggressive, and also to make sure that they're that we can rehome as many as we can. Unfortunately, this year the number of euthanized dogs did increase quite significantly compared to previous years. We have had a number of owners who've signed over particularly aggressive dogs, unfortunately not suitable for rehoming. So I think that that's reflected in those numbers. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. Councillors, questions? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. For people in town as a dog owner, if they were looking at these figures, they would see that the rural working dog is offered at a substantial discount in terms of registration. Do we have any breakdown as to the cost of policing the rural dog as against the pot liquor in town here that wanders the streets?
The short answer is no, that we don't have any data around that. You know, rural dogs also feature in our impoundings, or lost and found dogs. Not as often as in town, obviously. Population density, you know, leads to more dogs wandering around the place. It's a very difficult to answer.
Thank you.
Councillor Blackman.
Thank you. I was just wondering if you'd be able to indicate how many of the dog-related complaints involve unregistered dogs, or is it the 49 infringements on the previous page listed are kind of a direct correlation with that? And then of the complaints that have been made, how many would feature the same dog multiple times?
Sorry, can you just repeat the first part of your question?
Oh, I was just wondering if the 49 infringements for non-registration is kind of a direct correlation with how many of the dog-related complaints listed. You get what I mean? Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we generally find is that obviously every year we go through the registration process, and you know, the infringements are effectively the bottom line for people who haven't registered through that process. So these are dogs that we're aware of. We've sent information for registration, and we've asked the owners to apply to register their dogs, and they failed to do so. So the large proportion of those infringements will be from that process. Generally, when we find unregistered dogs, more often than not, they come to our attention because they're wandering, so they're subject to complaints. So that would be correct. What we generally do is, depending on the circumstances, if we've had the dog previously, if we're aware of the dog and it's been unregistered previously, we might issue an infringement notice. But the thing is, we're guided by our compliance and enforcement policy. So if we find a dog that's unregistered, as a first instance, we might give the owner 2 weeks to register their dog. They have an opportunity to do that, and then we might issue an infringement notice.
And the second question was as to of the 633 complaints, you know, how many would have featured the same dog multiple times?
Yeah, I haven't prepared anything to answer that, but I mean, it's definitely the case that we repeatedly deal with the same dogs. One dog, I think we've impounded, I think that's 14 times, I think.
That is mentioned in
Yeah, it's noteworthy. Yeah, so one dog was impounded 14 times. So I think that dog's been rehomed since. I think we managed to rehome it. We just had an owner that was not being responsible, and eventually their circumstances were such that they couldn't keep claiming the dog. and it's been rehomed. It's kind of a success story, really. You know, it's seems to be doing well.
So just further to that, did they have to pay a fee each time to get it back?
Yes, they would have. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess further to that original question from Councillor Blackler on the number, and maybe Caitlin can answer this one, but you know, is it kind of, you know, the real problem dogs, the repeat offenders, you know, is it sort of 10 or 50 dogs? You know, is there sort of an indication of those ones that are repeat offenders?
Caitlin, do you have any can you comment on that at all?
I believe that a lot of people that we're dealing with are repeat offenders.
Okay.
However, we just continuously will have met someone new, and then that person will become a repeat offender. So it's kind of just like a cycle at the moment with people. And no matter how much education and stuff you give them, and they just don't seem to get it.
Okay.
They don't seem to understand
Right.
what they need to be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. No, thank you very much for that. It's good to understand how the problem keeps, you know, persists, I suppose.
We're definitely talking about a minority and of people. Yet we deal with a lot. And these are the people that you'll see come through from warnings, infringement notices, and actually one of the people that would be sort of referring to now is currently being prosecuted. So got to the stage where we needed to file charges because and retain their dogs.
Yeah, thank you. Deputy Mayor Halali, then Councillor Hopkins and Councillor Holden.
Thank you through the chair. Thank you very much for your report. It's really interesting. I guess the next step would be just evaluating, you know, like what the trends are, because I can see a lot of it is around owner behaviour. And then I was just interested in terms of whether you would consider broadening your education community safety type approach to consider like what are we doing to helpfully support owners to comply? You know, like do we have an incentive, you know, like system just to kind of help support them in terms of their compliance? I'm aware that there would be another, you know, like a category that would be quite different, but you know, like the low to moderate dog owners, you know, like are there other steps that we could take to helpfully support and encourage and motivate them to be compliant? A lot of the trends are there behavioural, you know, like kind of things. And from my experience with doing community outreach programs to help educate community, it takes usually between 3 to 5 years to help embed, you know, like, and you can start to see it at the 4th, you know, like the 5th year in terms of behavioural shifts. So I guess there's just some insights, you know, like from a community education outreach perspective, but also what are we doing to helpfully support an incentive type system just to consider.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, that type of proactive work that you're talking about, really, we recognise that it needs to be done. You know, when you're sort of flat out responding to complaints, you get in this sort of catch-22 situation, and you're dealing with these people that are problematic, or the dogs that cause problems, and that takes up the majority of your time. But and so it's a real challenge to be proactive. But this year we've engaged dog behaviourists, so we've sort of started a partnership with a dog behaviourist, and we want to. We know that this person's got a good product that people can take advantage of. It's a great education product, and we're hoping to look at ways that we can promote that material to the community and bring it to them. So an example is that this week we have an initiative in the Awamoa Off-Lead Dog Park where we're going to be delivering some information, and we're also going to be starting our pre-engagement then for the bylaws as well. So we want people, the first step, to be familiar with their responsibilities as dog owners. But then there's all of the other stuff that comes with it. It's the handling of dogs, understanding dog behaviour and language, and things like that. So we're going to be looking more at doing that in the community as much as you know we practically can. And the other aspirational thing that we'd like to achieve is to start bringing education to schools. Again, you know, it's a challenging to get this going when you're under such a high kind of workload. But we think that's an important thing too, to take it to schools, just promote dog safety. We hopefully reduce the number of attacks that we have.
Thank you, councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, look, okay, so we have to do these annual reports under section 10A of the Act every year. I'm just curious whether you think it's possible under, say, 1A or B or 2C or D to actually suggest or promote legislative change in this report?
Through the chair, through the regulatory managers forum, we regularly discuss different trends that are occurring through different districts and problematic issues that we find. And through the Canterbury Mayoral Forum, the regulatory managers have input into that where we can make suggestions. All the councils are facing the same issues that we are. We're not unique in terms of the issues that we have. The Dog Control Act is recognised as actually being overdue for a revamp. We've got a number of problematic dogs that are coming into the country that are being bred. There needs to be a lot more focus in the Act in terms of education and responsible ownership. The Act can be very prohibitive in terms of how we actually deal with people. It's very prescriptive. So I personally know that the regulatory managers from the Canterbury district that I'm involved in, that we have been talking about issues and changes that we should be making. And it's just a matter of the Department of Internal Affairs taking notice of that. But the more that we can promote and talk about change, the more likely it is that there will be some change to the Dog Control Act in the future. We can also take a little bit of control over that ourselves in terms of our bylaw and our dog control policy, which is up for renewal next year. We're doing our pre-engagement. We're really encouraging the community to put in submissions. It needs to be a sentence long. There's a lot of feeling out there in the community about what's right and what's wrong with our dog control policy and our dog control bylaw. And we need to make sure that that what we're going to try and promote and put forward in regards to any changes is what the community wants, but also making sure the community understands what our obligations are under the Act.
Thank you. I'm going to go to councillor Holding now.
Thank you, Mayor Kircher. Tristan, you made a reference as to the operational expense of running the pound and people of abandoning dogs. Is that a service we offer there, or is it more dogs that are being impounded?
So we do. It's a sort of bit of a balancing act. We don't want to become a dog rescue service, but we do have a fee for people to sign over a dog. So, but we can use that as a sort of, we might tend to guide a particular person and dog towards that option because it might be that we're having a number of issues with that dog. Yeah. So, sorry. It has increased recently. We've noticed that this year's been particularly busy. We have had a number of people sign over their dogs. We've had an increased number of issues with aggressive dogs too. So those dogs will be amongst those that are handed over to us as well, because we've managed to encourage the owner towards that, or they've ultimately taken responsibility to do that. It's only when they don't take responsibility that as well as perhaps a dog that's attacked, that we need to seek an order for destruction from the court. So
Just further to that, councillor, Caitlin and the team have some really good sort of informal partnerships with dog related organisations for rehoming. So we have a huge success rate. So if we do get dogs handed over to us or signed over, we have like a huge success rate in terms of actually rehoming them. We'll actually sort of go a little bit above and beyond to try and make sure that these dogs are actually rehomed responsibly.
Thank you. Councillor Percival.
Yeah, I'd just like to congratulate your department for its proactive approach. You always seem to have something going on, the A&P grounds or the parks. I think you're doing your utmost to try and educate people. Good on you.
Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic question. Good comment. Right, there's someone prepared to move that we approve the report. Councillor Linwood, Councillor Lackler, thank you. Anyone speaking to that? I would just reiterate what Councillor Percival said. You know, it's a very busy area. It's pretty contentious at times, I know, and you know, difficult situations that staff are put in some case, some fairly risky situations. So we are mindful of that. We want to make sure that you're kept as, you know, safe as possible during doing your job, and that you're able to carry it out. Because I guess dog control is one of those things which is about public safety and so forth as much as anything else. So thank you very much for everything that you do, and pass our thanks on to the rest of the team. But with that, I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against, that's carried. Thank you. Thanks very much for coming along. Councillors, we've got 2 minutes, so I think we'll whip through to item 6.3. The adjusted audit fees, and just note that there has been some significant progress made on this one, not quite to where we wanted it to be, but thanks very much to officers for the work they've done. And Mr. Hope, if you'd like to make any further comment, it'd be appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, as noted, yeah, we have tried to act on all of the items that were in the original recommendation, but we have gotten to a point, yeah, after a lot of involvement with the chair of the Performance Audit and Risk Committee and the chief executive, really engaging with the deputy auditor, general local government, and the chief executive of Audit New Zealand to try and come up with a fee structure that complied with the resolution, but that has not been possible. So we do need to increase it to actually allow the engagement letter to be signed and for this year's audit to be performed. It is only a 1-year arrangement, and the further 2 years will be subject to further negotiation. So either myself or Mr. Parnley will have you to answer questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, very simple question, really. On page 83 of the report, the third paragraph starts, unfortunately, council now has no option other than to agree to the revised audit fee, which may go up year after year because they won't agree to a 3-yearly deal. Why do we have no option? My view is, why don't we just say no? Have the annual report or LTP tagged and tell the community why, and say we're saving you $230,000. Why can't we just say no?
Well, it is breaching the Local Government Act, which we all probably have views on. Probably the more important consequence is it is a requirement of our membership of the Local Government Funding Agency to produce an audited annual report. And that is pretty critical to council's operations. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the report is probably not quite correct. Yeah, I mean, the council does have options, but it has little option to agree. And yeah, it wouldn't be that our annual report would be tagged. It'd be unaudited, would be in breach of the law, and there'd be consequences for the organisation of the community that are probably not ones that you want to bear.
I mean, it is at the extreme end of non-compliance, and I have no doubt that we would be very quickly removed, and there'd be commissioners sitting around this table. So it is of that importance, and yes, we can say no, but quite happy for you to lead that charge. We'll see how you get on. Look, we've pushed back and we've pushed back. None of us want to be paying as much as we do. Between us and our council controlled organisations, the fees that are paid for audit are just absolutely ridiculous. So much money going out of our community that would be much better spent within it, and still being able to have audits that look after the financial scrutiny that people do expect to have there. So it is it's stupid money being spent on this sort of stuff when so much of it isn't about financials, but that is the way it is. So, yep. Any other questions? Okay, someone able to move. Deputy Mayor Halele moved and Councillor Carroll seconded that. Any further discussion? Well, Councillor Linwood was brought to tears on that one. No, Councillor Percival, yes.
I'd just like to comment on the fact that the stated fee for the audit, what I'd like to be considered is the cost internally and the resources that are put into preparing for the audit. I would say that it would be double that cost of what we actually pay the auditors. And it seems, it always intrigued me, the fact that you've got competent staff here who produce the necessary information, and how much of it is discussed and debated and gone deeply into by the audit, when it seems to me it's like having an audit in your own business. You know, you've got the facts, you've got the figures, and why they dig so deep into operational affairs really confuses me. Just a comment.
Thank you. And I was on Real Radio this morning talking about this topic, and you made the statement that by the time you take that staff time into account, we're over 1% of the rate take is spent on this activity. So with that, we will put the motion. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Unanimously and reluctantly, as Councillor Hopkins has said. No. Right, moving now back to 6.2, Waitaki District Health Services Limited Annual Report, and we welcome to the Chamber Keith Marshall, CEO for Waitaki District Health Services, and online we have Melanie Tavendale, Chair of the Board. So we're just getting things switched over, and councillors, there is a presentation within the agenda, which the presentation starts on page 78. We'll be working through that. But welcome, Mr. Marshall, and happy for you to get things underway while we make the technology work.
Kia ora mai tātou. Just a quick overview of the annual accounts, and I am drawing the distinction for us in terms of those being annual accounts rather than being an annual report, and that's because of the consolidation of observatory group into our accounts, as has been the case following on from your immediately concluded conversation about OAG and the joys of audit fees and the audit process. So this is consolidated accounts. I'm not in a legal position to be able to talk to Observatory Village. That's beyond our ability to make comment about. So by way of a quick overview, the surplus here is just short of $2 million compared to 4.4 last year. Again, because of the consolidation, that's there are a number of factors behind that, not least of which are asset revaluations and other matters. Health reforms are carrying on at pace around the country, and notwithstanding the upcoming change of government, the move to a national health service won't really change too much. And our ongoing financial sustainability issues around the hospital themselves remain problematic, but are a heck of a lot better than they were a year ago. So moving on from there, we do have those underlying financial issues at the hospital. We just cannot bypass those, and it would be improper to talk about our annual accounts without pointing to those ongoing issues. The underlying operational deficit at the hospital is over $1 million, and we've had this conversation in the past. So when I say underlying, that's not including all of the ongoing pressures around penal rates and staffing and other issues which are continually on us. So we have a higher operating deficit than $1 million, but there's an underlying basis of operations there. Understaffing is chronic right across the sector. So New Zealand is about between 7,000 and 8,000 nurses short of what it needs for the health sector, and around about 1,700 doctors nationwide. So those contingent pressures that exist in the whole of the system are also seen here. So lastly for us, I guess the issue is this has been a pretty full-on year that you're seeing the end result of. It's been a massive turnaround in our fortunes, and I just happened to be in getting prepped because I thought that Councillor Hopkins might have a few financial questions. I happened to go back and look at our end of June outturn numbers just for the hospital alone. And we had budgeted a deficit of just over $4 million. What we've turned in is a deficit of just over 550. So that is a massive turnaround. Largely that's off the back of the funding uplift. As I've said here a number of times, us solving the short-term financial pressures is not actually the mission here. What we need to do is solve this on a longer-term basis, and importantly, both clinically and financially for the community. So that's was the critical part of the funding discussion we'd entered into with Te Whatu Ora over the past year. We have an undertaking from them that they will get us on a pathway to that, and that work is ongoing even as we speak. The relationship with Te Whatu Ora is superb. We are getting really good traction on a whole array of fronts. You know, I guess the underpinning thing about that is simply that for the first time in New Zealand's history, we do have a genuine national health service, as opposed to a whole pile of individual fiefdoms who operated in their own ways. And we are starting to see a number of benefits from that, even though those won't be necessarily readily apparent to the public. But for us, this is a good step forward. We continue to get our house in order, but the piece of work that still lies in front of us is getting that clinical and financial sustainability in place, and our teams right through the year. So it seems hard to remember because we're all in the joys of a post-COVID society, even though we've had the highest numbers in COVID reporting over the past fortnight than we've seen since the beginning of the year. But in the course of the past year, we've been through a COVID epidemic. Our staffing levels were way down. We've had a huge amount of issues to get through, and the team at the hospital have just carried on piling in, delivering what this community needs in terms of health services. So they're an amazing group of people. They rock up and they do amazing work each day. So happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. And yeah, your comments are noted around particularly the gain over the year, around the financials and so forth, but also very importantly around the effort that staff have been putting in to make sure that any disruptions have been minimised. And obviously we did have several disruptions with the ED, but yeah, good to see that you've been able to manage them and keep them to an absolute minimum. It's something the community relies on very heavily, and I know you've done a lot of work, and obviously staff have done a lot of work to fill gaps as much as possible along the way. So thank you very much to everyone for that. Right, councillors, any questions? And I just note Councillor Hopkins used his annual quota with his last question, so he does not have any more until 2024. So, Councillor Hopkins, we'll let you have one more then.
No, I have a number of financial questions. I guess just looking at this very brief summary you've given us, I'd like to be able to have some conversation about the more detailed information in the report itself. But I'm thinking if I'm a puzzled or sceptical member of the public, we see on page 80 of our agenda that the underlying operating deficit is still in excess of 1 million. And on the next page, we say the actual deficit was only 564,000 for the financial year 22-23. So can you explain what appears to be sort of a contradiction in those figures? Because it seems to me important from a point of view of public confidence.
Certainly, that's one of the easier questions that you posed me over the past 2 years. And so the difference in around about $1 million or so underlying deficit and the outturn result that we got of about 560 is that as part of the negotiations and discussion with Te Whatu Ora, we wrote off about 2 years worth of past debts from Te Whatu Ora, and so that ended up getting recorded as income.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Hunter-Daly.
Thank you through the chair. Thank you for your report, and also for your work with the hospital. I know that you're a strong advocate for our hospital and healthcare system here in Waitaki. Can you please tell me, like, what are your views in terms of like a joined up health system that could potentially incorporate primary, secondary, and community health outreach? What your views are, and maybe what strategic partnerships that we could be looking at leveraging on or maximizing for the wellbeing of our community and providing support.
And just, I know you can probably talk about this for an hour, but we don't have that long, but if you can respond as succinctly, but thoroughly as possible.
The executive summary. It is a long and complex discussion. I guess we're all inheriting the historic accident of a bits and pieces contracted health system, which comes from out of the 90s. It was why the hospital ends up being independent of the public system at the moment. Putting that back together is going to take some time. I think that we have some real opportunities, particularly for our area, around how do we work on after hours care, how do we work around primary care, how do we interact with other providers in the system better than we currently able to do by our little tiny bounded contract lines. The conversations we've been having over the last 4 or 5 months with Te Whatu Ora, I can see absolutely a pathway to that being quite different from here on out. And what we need around that ultimately is a community conversation around what the configuration of health services needs to look like. And I know Te Whatu Ora are committed to doing that. So we should see in the next little while something start to emerge from Te Whatu Ora about commissioning and engaging in that discussion. So yeah, I mean, there are some invisible things that have happened behind the scenes. There are some less than helpful things that have happened behind the scenes. But yeah, we definitely need to work our way to a much better joined up integrated system. And Te Whatu Ora is the organisation that will get us there as opposed to the DHBs.
Thank you. A note, Melanie has been joined on, so apologies for the slight delay in getting joined onto the meeting, Mel. Do you have anything you wish to add?
No, I think Keith has covered it quite well. I think when it comes to the community sort of role and the partnership idea, it's certainly things that we need to look into as a board in the future. But I think we've just got the pressing issues of the Te Whatu Ora contracts and things ahead of us at the moment that do, you know, they affect the availability of the hospital in general. So I think we need to just make sure we get the must-dos over the line. And then we do, without a doubt, need to sort of work on what is the big package for the future, really.
Thank you. And while I'm talking to you, just thank you to the board for all the work that they've been doing. I know it's continues to be a heavier than usual workload, and the achievements that the board and Keith in particular and the rest of the team as well have made over this last year have been very significant and wouldn't have happened without a lot of that work. So thank you very much for all of that. And just thanks for taking time out from your day job. See you're still at work there at the moment. You could put some specials behind you maybe for the live stream and promote some sales along the way, but we won't go into that one there. Councillors, do you have any other questions, or is someone happy to move the adoption of this report? You want to move that, Councillor Hopkins?
No, I do have a question.
Okay.
If you're allowed.
Yes, you're into 2025.
Again, sorry, Keith. Some of the numbers don't. If looking at them as a layperson, I wonder if they make sense. For instance, page 45 of the report shows that receipts from Te Whatu Ora patients, residents, and so on has jumped from 19 million to 24. And yet when you go to the very first page of the report, it shows that the total comprehensive revenue and expense, whereas it was 4,423,491, is down to 1,945,227. So again, I'm reading that and a layperson can say, hell, that's a lot worse this year, and yet all the other figures seem to be better. Can you explain that, please?
Certainly, I know what the hospital numbers are. I have an insight to what the observatory village numbers are. And I can say based on what you're looking at there is the consolidated accounts of both entities.
Okay.
So that's the problem of interpreting. I mean, it's the conversation we had repeatedly around the statement about the blending of the two accounts. But from the hospital position, I mean, I can tell you categorically now, we had budgeted for the shareholders' equity to be a mere $3 million by the end of the financial year, and it actually turned out to be over 10. I can tell you that we had budgeted to be technically bust by the end of the year, and that we had
Sorry,
actually.
Keith, I'm sorry, your microphone's not on. Sorry, realised.
You don't want me to repeat
No,
that, do you?
no,
No,
just
good.
carry on. That's fine.
No, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Thompson,
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'm happy to move the adoption of the report.
thank you very much. We have a seconder. Councillor Linwood, thank you. Any comments? Okay, I'll put it, those in favour, please say aye. Those against? That's carried. I'd like to move a further motion, and that is a vote of thanks to Keith, to the board and to the hospital team for all the excellent work you have done to get us into this much better position. We know it's not, so that's the end of that part of it. We know it's not finished, there's more to be done, but it's been hugely significant. So thank you for that. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Blackler. Okay, with that, put it, those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against, that's carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mel. Thanks for joining. Back to the shop.
Thank you.
Okay. See you later. Okay, councillors, so someone like to move, go into public excluded now, please. Councillor Hopkins and Councillor Holding. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
And against, that's carried. Thank you very much to all who have joined us, and we'll be going in. We've got one item in public excluded, and then we'll be finished the meeting. So thank you very much for joining.